Okay, well, it's 10 o'clock, and so glad to have y'all joining us this morning. My name is Jack Gagnon. I'm here with the Office of the State Budget and Management. And we have two folks kind of serving as grants directors on these SCIF and directed grants. That's myself and Bessie. She's on this call today, but I'll be running through the slide deck. Just also want to give a special thanks to Carol, who's set up this webinar. So just thank you so much for that. Before we begin, just a little bit of housekeeping. I know y'all have questions, and that's why we're here today. Please use the Q&A feature of this platform to get those into us. We're going to run through this slide deck, but I do believe some of the most valuable pieces of this will be that Q&A session that we're going to have. So please just know that, please use that throughout the presentation. And so that's how we're going to, get your questions for you, and we're going to get those answered, okay? So without further ado, I'm just going to jump into it. Um, Again, my name is Jack Gagnon here with the Office of State Budget and Management, and today we're here to discuss directed grants, particularly for nonprofits and anyone that's not considered local government. And so that would be the nonprofits, community colleges, and even some instances of for-profit entities. And so what we have here today for us, an introduction to OSBM. We're going to do a step-by-step process for how to receive these state grant funds. We've got a lot of resources on the OSBM website. Can't emphasize that enough. And then again, we'll get some questions, and of course, we're going to focus in on the state capital and infrastructure funds, as that is definitely the pot of money that many of you on this call today are interested in hearing about. Just to at a high level, the Office of State Budget and Management, our primary role is a fiscal advisor to the governor, and we do prepare his budget, and as well. And once we do get a passed budget by the General Assembly, we work to administer that budget. OSBM is composed of a variety of staff. We've got budget analysts, policy analysts, internal auditors, performance management advisors. One thing you'll notice is that there's not a lot of, grant managers. And so we typically have about 30 of these grants, this type of grant that we do when the budget comes out. And this year we're handling about 600 of these. And so this is, not new to us, but the volume is new to us. And so, that's why we're, doing some more outreach than we typically do. And we're just glad to have you here with us today. And so, first things first, the first thing you're going to want to do is realize that you received a grant. And, if you're on this call today, then you've done that. And so we're glad to have that. And the next step would be to submit the required documentation. Many of you have heard from us, and I do hope everyone has at this point. And what we're looking for there is the W-9 form, the electronic payment form with the supporting documentation. That's very important. That there's about three options on there that you can tack onto that electronic payment form. So please do, thoroughly review those forms and make sure you submit supporting documentation with that electronic payment form. The next one will be the conflict of interest statement. And then the following would be the no tax overdue certification. That actually needs to be notarized. And again, those are the big four. And then also, the fifth would be the actual grant agreement, or some refer to as the contract. But we'll work with you to flush out the scope of work prior to doing that. And so, as you see there, after we get all those documents and get that contract executed, you'll receive the funds, and then you'll work back to report those, what's been used, with those funds. And then moving forward, what is a directed grant? And so that's a non-recurring fund allocated by a state agency to a non-state entity. And so in this case, we, OSBM, are the state agency, and you are the non-state entity. And so, and this, may not be that applicable, but this term does include units of local government and public authority. So that, our local government friends, that somewhat of a new idea to them. Um, just to not get too much in the weeds here, but what is not a directed grant is also good. Anything that's a recurring fund, so this would be what we have y'all here for today is a one-time payment. This is a recurring fund would mean it's in the budget each year. Specific grant programs that certain agencies may have year in, year out. And then, directed projects would be something, and you can see in the language there that the budget spells that out as a directed project. So, not too much concern of this group, but we did just want to provide this information for, just a better understanding. If you look through the budget, you'll see that there's just, a whole plethora of kind of different verbiage and terms to, when it comes to this money. The State Appropriations Act, which is what named these grants that we're working with y'all today, there's two pieces. There's the bill, which has the real language, and kind of the more lengthy language, and then there's the committee report or the money report, and that's more of a line item of which entity is getting what money and what's it for. And then there's also bills that modify the budget, and we've had one, and we believe that there may be another, and that's typically a technical corrections bill. And you can see that listed out here that there, we may be expecting another one later in February, maybe early March. But it is difficult to say and predict the General Assembly and what they're going to do with that. Um, just moving forward, and like I said, there's over 900 of these directed grants, more than 2 billion over 2 years. There's 13 different agencies that are administering these, and there's definitely multiple sources of funding. But if you're on this call today, it's because you're getting a general fund grant from OSBM or you're getting a SCIF fund grant from OSBM. So I, don't want to confuse anyone with this. This was just some slides for your information. Um, and we did put together a directed grants database on our website that if you have questions of, if you're receiving other grants from other state agencies, perhaps that's where you can find that. Really want to emphasize this because all the forms, all of our guidance, everything that we, OSBM has out on these SCIF grants and the directed grants that our office is doing is under this directed grant section of our website. So please, I cannot emphasize this enough. Please check out our website. It's a great resource. We've got FAQs. All the documents are out there. And so you would go to stewardship services and then down to directed grants. And then, you can see the directed grants database here, but on another tab, there's all the documents you need and some FAQs. And so I would really, before you do anything, definitely please check out that website and just take a look at the information out there. Again, this was just an example of the database that we put together with all the grants. As you see here, it's got keyword search. So one that was very popular was some of these grants to the sheriff's office. You can just simply, type in your entity and you'll see here that you've got the agency contact, which agency is administering it, and the source of funds. Again, I want to emphasize for today's call, it's going to be the administering agency will be OSBM, and your source of funds, the majority of them will be the SCIF grants, but there are some general fund grants on here today that OSBM will be administering. Um, so again, that next step, submit the required documentation. Can't emphasize this enough. It's a W-9 form, the electronic payment form with the supporting documentation, the conflict of interest statement, and as well as the no overdue tax certification. And again, that needs to be notarized, and then we'll work to, flush out a scope of work and get in a grant agreement, and we'll move forward with that and get you your funds. Um, Just want to, as we look here, the W-9 is what we really need, the electronic payment form, and like I said, we also need that supporting documentation that accompanies that, the copy of the conflict of interest policy, and again, the sworn statement for no overdue tax debts. And then from there, we'll negotiate and sign an agreement to get you these funds and really specify what those funds will be spent on. As long as it matches that description in the budget, there shouldn't be too many issues on that front. And so that's where we come in here with the scope of work. And that's where we really flush out what that money is going to be spent on. A lot of these have, pretty broad language when it comes to stuff like capital improvements, and we've got, definitions in statute of what that is. And we'll work with our budget analysts that are handling these grants to make sure that we get a good scope of work for you. Um, in that scope of work, there's, the activities of what's going to be done, the accomplishments, the performance measures, and then just a loose budget of what, exactly how that project is going to, be spent. Um, and then, just here, there's just a lot of, and we'll have this for you, just the statute and the administrative code. We've got this all listed out, and please don't be overwhelmed by this. In the required in the contract provisions per rule, and again, our contracts will have all of this. So, please don't, let this stress anyone out. The purpose of the award, services, objectives, and expected results. Again, that'll be in the scope of works, the source of funds. I'm not going to read through all of these. And we do have this slide deck posted, but just please know that our office will provide the grant agreement, and they will have, the required clauses or pieces, so to speak, in there. Just a couple special items to remember. These grants, as stated in the budget, are for non-sectarian, non-religious purposes only. State funds for, only if you're a nonprofit, for one employee, that's capped at about 120,000 for salary. And, again, that both of those are in the budget law. And so, that there's, no negotiating on that. That is in the budget law. And then for the general fund grants, they do not revert until June 30th, 2023. Want to emphasize that we've got that caveat different for SCIF grants. The SCIF grants do not revert until the project is completed. And again, just we want to caveat that this group today that we're presenting to, there's a couple of y'all that are receiving those general fund grants, and those are the ones that revert on June 30th, 2023. The SCIF grants do not revert at that time. They are good for the life of the project. Okay, and then moving on to receiving your funds, the fun part. Um, directed grants of 100,000 or less are made in a single payment. And then if you're getting a larger, more than 100,000, that'll be quarterly, just kind of based on or monthly payments. Just want to emphasize that for the SCIF grants, again, this is different. You get all of the money up front for the SCIF grants. Um, and then just want to emphasize that again, the directed grants shall not revert until June 30th, 2023. The SCIF grants do not revert at that time. Those actually are good for the life of the project. So just want to make the delineation clear on the general fund grants and the SCIF grants, kind of two different pots of money there. And then just, moving forward here, just some funding notes here for everyone. Grantees you can earn interest on these funds that we give you. It just has to be spent on the same the same purpose or project or grant. So just want to be clear on that. You can earn interest. It just has to be spent for the same purpose. Let me see here, Custom. Yes, and so for many of you, if it's a large grant over that $500,000 threshold, There's some audit requirements in that. Audits can be charged. Yellow book audits, that are required can be charged to these grant funds. As well as, we're going to make sure no one's on the state suspension funding list. I don't think we'll have any issues there with this group, and just so that's just a note for other state agencies to be aware. You can't send funds to folks that are on the suspension of funding list. And then conduct the work, get the project done, and report back to us. And so three levels of reporting. Just want to kind of touched on this in the last slide about what sort of requirements there are on these. You see level 1 is at $25,000 or less. Level 2 is up to half a million, and then level 3 is at over half a million. And that's where we come into that that program specific single audit with the yellow book. That's where we were saying that you can charge the cost of that audit to the grant funds. You'll be reporting back on these funds quarterly. This was just some general guidance here to all state agencies. So just be aware that that is quarterly reporting. And then also, audits must be provided no later than 9 months after the grantee's fiscal year end, and we'll be asking for that fiscal year end on the contract. Some unique situations, and I don't know how much of this we'll really run into. Is the return of those funds. We'd prefer that we get those spent for the purpose that's listed in the budget. But in the event that you don't spend the funds, we are going to need those back, and that's spelled out there in the contract and the code. Um, Also, we do need you to, report back to us on these funds. We don't want to put anyone on the suspension of funding list or have any issues like that. And as well, in the event that you subgrant these funds out and the organization ceases to exist, or something odd like that, we are going to need you to report that to us as well, and we need to get that to fiscal research promptly. Again, I don't think we'll run into any issues like that, but this is just informational. Wanted y'all to hear it. Um, And then, this is more for other state agencies here. So, we'll just, quickly move through this and on just some of the reporting there. Um, Again, resources and legal written materials. We've got everything out on our website, but just wanted to provide everyone kind of a list of statutes and administrative code. Doesn't hurt to be aware of that. But again, our contracts will have, everything necessary, to really, we'll be okay with this. I don't want anyone on this call to necessarily be stressing out over statutes or anything like that. We'll definitely, keep you on the trails as best we can there. Um, so, just want to emphasize, we're not going to pause for questions quite yet, but this is if you're getting a general fund directed grant by OSBM, that accounting at osbm.nc.gov is the central email for those general fund directed grants. Again, the majority of you on here today are SCIF grants. So just to keep things moving, so we have plenty of time for questions here at the end. Again, I think that's the most valuable. We're going to jump into the good stuff here, the state capital and infrastructure fund grants, the SCIF grants, as we refer to them. As we kind of had stated before, there's over 900 directed grants. It's over $2 billion, and there's 13 agencies that are doing that. So down a subset of that is the SCIF grants, and there's only 3 administering agencies, and OSBM is doing the majority of them. And so that's probably why you're on the call today. Are these SCIF grants, and so we've got 582 of these. It's $1.4 billion. And so, I want to, make sure we do have a lot of these. And just to, right here on section 40.8, these are non-recurring funds allocated from the state capital and infrastructure fund to non-state entities. Again, kind of mirrors some of that language that we had already gone through. Um, and as well, for non-sectarian, non-religious purposes only. Again, you'll kind of see that a lot of this does match. There's just some slight caveats on the skiff grants here. Kind of the skiff grant process, and again, I think many of you have heard from us, and we've gotten this rolling for you. We send out weekly emails on Tuesdays. Occasionally, we'll send out another one, but Tuesdays are our big days. The weekly emails come from skiffgrantsnc@osbm.nc.gov. If you don't have that email address written down, please do. That's our central email address for the skiff grants. We've got analysts assigned to help get this money out the door, but and you can work with them through this process. But the central email address is that skiffgrantsnc@osbm.nc.gov. So please make sure that you're not getting blocked emails for that. Um, that's a very important email address. Can't emphasize that enough. Also, we're using ShareFile to get these documents that we need from y'all. So I believe at this point everyone's received this ShareFile link. It's just a link that you click on and then you just upload your documents. That's just to keep some of the more sensitive stuff, out of the email, so to speak. So I cannot emphasize this enough. Please favorite, star, whatever it takes, keep that share file link, because not only are you going to use that to upload documents to us for, getting this money out the door, you're going to use that same link to send us quarterly reports on how you're spending that money. So just want to emphasize, please keep that link. Um, One other thing, and I know not a lot of folks are quite here quite yet. But once we get all those documents from you, get that scope of work flushed out, we will be signing a grant agreement. We'll be doing that via DocuSign, and so that'll be it'll just come to your email. We do, just so you and we're aware that the individual that we may be working with to get these forms is a different individual than the person who's going to be signing this grant agreement. So please, work with your budget analyst. And I don't want to get ahead of ourselves here. I know many folks are still working through these forms, but please make sure your assigned budget analyst knows prior, before we get this contract signed, who's going to be signing it, and we're going to need an email address for the mayor or uh, the chief executive officer of the nonprofit. So whoever that may be, we understand that could be different than who we're working with to get these forms processed, so to speak. Again, we've got a slew of budget analysts that are working hard to get this. And again, if you're not sure who your analyst is, just email that skiffgrantsnc@osbm.nc.gov, and we'll get you in contact, and they can provide any technical assistance you may need. Um, so this is where we are. On the grand timeline here, and this is again like an ideal state. So we made initial contact that week of the 3rd. The week of January 10th was W-9 and electronic payment forms. The following week was the conflict of interest policy and the no overdue tax debt. Again, the no overdue tax debt, we're going to need that notarized when it comes in. And then this week, we went out on the scope of work. Again, I just want to reiterate that we're going to need those first 4 forms: the W-9, the electronic payment form, conflict of interest, and no overdue tax before we go into the scope of work. So we definitely do not want to put the cart before the horse there. So if you're on this call, please get those W-9s, electronic payment forms, conflict of interest, and no overdue tax debt. Upload that into the link that's been provided, and so we can go ahead and get those processed for you. Um, And then, like I said, once we get all of that good stuff and flush out the scope of work, we'll get that grant agreement via DocuSign. It's very easy. It'll just come in an email. Essentially, you just click on it, and that will be our grant agreement. And then we'll get you a payment once we get that grant agreement signed within 10 days. Our folks are very good, but we cannot send out any money until we get those contracts signed via DocuSign. Disbursement of funds. Our goal is to get you these funds, and we will as long as you get us everything before February 26th. And like I said, for these SCIF grants, you get the whole lump sum payment in one transfer. So please be aware that our goal is to get you these funds, and we will do our best as long as you get us everything and work with us on that front. We will get you everything before February 26, 2022. Again, we're just going to make one payment to you, and so you'll have that, and just report back to us on how you spent that. That'll be spelled out in the contract on that piece on the reporting. Again, very much similar as we had in the other slides. Interest can be earned. It just needs to be spent on the same purpose. You can charge the cost of those yellow book audits to the grant itself. And again, nonprofit employees are capped at 120,000. And then as you see, we were trying to emphasize SCIF grants. These do not revert until the funds are expended or the particular project has been completed. This is very unique. We don't see a lot of these, but so please don't be concerned about the funds reverting. These funds are with you until the project is completed. So and also just be aware on the grant agreement, we have to put an end date on that. And so you'll see that we wrote it for 2 years. If it's a large capital project and are already aware that it's going to take longer than 2 years, we'll work with our analysts and we can extend that just to avoid any any amendments or anything like that. And so, the first four documents are fairly straightforward. And so we just wanted to spend a little bit of time here on the SCIF scope of work. So the three, the largest section is the objectives, the results, and the performance measures. And again, this form is out on our website. It's a Appendix A scope of work. It's a fillable PDF, and it's currently posted on our website. But again, if you're kind of new to if this is the first time you're hearing this, we're gonna really need those first four forms before we dive into the scope of work for you. Um, any sub grants and back to the scope of work here, any sub grants that you're going to do, that'll be listed on there. A loose or an estimated budget is what we're also looking for on there. We understand that things change, but we'll just need something that we can see on the budget for that project or that grant. The time period, again, we understand that things come up, but just to estimate the time period for that budget and that award. And again, that's all in that scope of work document. And then kind of a breakdown of the different types of expenditures you expect to see on there. And again, this is posted on our website, and as well as we have a great resource document, and this is just a quick excerpt from that. And so these SCIF grants fit into a couple different pots of whether it's buying equipment or a capital project of some sort. And so we just took an example here. We've got looks like we got a Columbus County Sheriff's Office getting a new office, $10 million. And so the objective would be to construct a new office for Columbus County. The expected result would be the new sheriff's office is built and placed into use in Columbus County. The performance measures would be broken out below in expected milestones. And so we definitely don't, we don't want to overcomplicate things. Most of these are capital projects by nature. And so we're just looking for some milestones, start date, end date. And so, just so we can kind of gauge where this project is and how it's moving along. Again, We've got examples posted on our website of, the various different types of shapes and sizes that these skiff grants come in. And so I think, you could almost just kind of find one that matches kind of what yours is and kind of just plug in your entity. We tried to make it as easy as we could for y'all. And so without further ado, that's all we have. Just want to emphasize we have a lot of great resources on our website. Please check it out. Skiff Grants NC OSBM. And again, please get that Skiff Grants NC at osbm.nc.gov. We want to get this money out to you. We just need your help doing it. Carol, I don't have good visibility on the questions coming in. Can you help us get through those?
Yes, I can, and we've had a lot of good activity in the Q&A, so thank you guys. And as you know, I'm going to go back up to the top and start with the ones we haven't answered yet. And as we're doing that, if you guys have other questions, please just drop them in, and we'll try and get to as many as we can today. We do have a way to gather these up and also push out additional answers if we run out of time. But let's start from the beginning. So this was a question from Lauren. Hello, when do you expect to start sending out contracts?
So we expect to start sending out contracts after we get back the scope of work. So the earliest that we could probably, get those out would be I would say early February. Early February is when we get that out. We just need everything else before we send you a contract, and we need to have the scope of work flushed out. And so I believe on our timeline that's either that second week of February or first week of February if we have everything. Um, we just haven't seen a lot of folks that are quite there yet, but really that first week of February is where we're slated to do that. Again, it's all contingent on us having everything back and the scope of work being flushed out. And so I just want to, don't want to give anyone false hope, but we really can't even talk contracts until we have all those other documents from you. But yes, the first week of February is if we have everything, that's when that would occur.
All right, let's go on to a question from Kelly. When reviewing the scope of work documentation, it states that the funds are to be used for expenditures after July 1st, 2021. What if we have expenditures before that date? Can those be included?
Unfortunately, that budget that was signed into law is only good from July 1, 2021, and so we can't allow any expenditures prior to that date. Um, there is a route if you did reach out to the General Assembly and got a technical correction to reimburse some of those costs prior to uh, you know uh, July prior to when the budget went into state. But as of right now, and as the way these are written, we can't go further than that. So it's July 1, 2021 is the earliest that we can go as of right now.
Okay, let's move on to a question from Rachel. Can the grantee apply for an extension on the use of these funds?
Uh, I'm assuming that are we talking for is this a general fund? Is it I take it because if it's a skiff grant, you don't need to be worried about that, to be honest with you. If it's a skiff grant, you have those funds for the life of the project. And so I wouldn't be particularly concerned about the timing of any of that with the skiff grant. The general funds do revert. And so if it is a general fund grant, that would be, we need to sort that out. Ideally, that can be difficult. We can't make any guarantees on that. As it's written, that general fund grant would revert, at the end of the, state fiscal year 2023.
Okay, this is a question from Kyle. How do I find out if our grant is a general fund grant or a SCIF?
Okay. And so if you go out to that, you know what, so
And Jack, I did post the link in that underneath that question for the directed grants.
yeah, and so
It's
the question that you're looking for there is, that kind of that section of the website right here. This is how you would figure that out. And so please, like I can't emphasize it enough. There's been a lot of effort on the website, so please check out the website and under that OSBM database of directed grants, just use that keyword search, and it's that source of funds, that far right column. On your screen right now, you see GF and SCIF. The general fund ones are the ones that I'm saying revert at the end of the state fiscal year 2023. The SCIF you have for the life of the project. So just want to make that clear there.
Okay, and then we had a question from Joshua. There were a couple follow-up parts to this, so let me read them all for you. We were referenced in the state budget in two places, in the Joint Conference Committee report and also the Conference Committee substitute. And he provided the lines in here. So I guess the question is, um, would he know which one he is?
Um, I'm not sure I fully grasp that. And Josh, which organization? Do we know which organization he's with?
Yes, I think I asked him down here. And you know what? Maybe that's one where we can just follow up directly.
Yeah, Josh, we'll get you taken care of. If you just want to email that skiff grants, and if Carol's got your information, I'll get up with you and we'll get that sorted out for you.
Yeah, we've got your organization here, so we know how to get in touch with you. Norma put a comment in saying, we will start receiving these emails now that you have our email address from registering for this. Oh, I see what you're saying, Norma. Yes, we have all the registration emails that you used to join this webinar. So we can compare those to our current contact list. So if we haven't been able to reach you, then now we have an email that we can use to reach out. So we'll do a comparison on that.
And we'll have
Uh,
our analysts reach out. We know, we know our initial stuff got stuck in a lot of filters, and so it's really come along the last 2 weeks, and where folks are aware, and we've had some of our friends at the General Assembly reach out as well, and so we're eager to get these funds out to y'all, and so it's kind of been a full court press, so to speak, from all sides, and so we'll now that we've got your contact, it'll go smoothly.
all right. Laura has a few items in here. If we have more than one grant, do we do a set of all forms for each grant?
Okay, so for we only need, for the big four documents, we only need one W-9, one electronic payment form, one conflict of interest statement, and one no tax debt. But we do need a scope of work for each of the grants, and we're going to need you'll have a separate contract for each grant. So, does that answer the question?
I believe so. She's not going to be able to return a
Okay.
response to us
Yeah,
now.
so you'll have a unique contract for each grant or like line item in the budget. So if your entity's receiving multiple, you'll have, if it's, a $1 million grant, you'll have a contract for that $1 million, and then if you have another one, you'll have a contract for that one. So yes, you'll have unique grant agreements for each grant, and we'll have, a unique scope of work for that specific grant that, matches the description.
So Laura also says the scope of work form isn't quite working. Should we handwrite in the responses? So we
I
can
think
take
there
a
was
look at
okay, and so I believe when it was initially posted, there was some issues with the text not scrolling. I believe that's been fixed now.
that was like a wrapping issue, wasn't
Yeah, it
it?
was a wrapping issue. So if you go out to the website now, it should be working. Um, But yeah, it should be working correctly now. But we'll take that form however you give it to us, to be honest with you. So if you'd prefer to handwrite it, not any issues with that. We just need that form filled out and but yeah, any way you can get that form to us, that's great. But I believe that should be fixed now.
So Laura also says, if we don't have the link for the submission of our documents or the contact information for our budget analyst, how do we get that information?
So please just email that skifgrantsnc@osbm.nc.gov and we'll make sure you get the link, and we'll also CC your analyst on there and kind of do, get you introduced and get that moving forward for you. So, want to emphasize that again. Um, Please email the skiff grants nc dot here we go. Please email that email address and we'll get you taken care of.
So Valerie would like to know, are indirect costs allowed in the budget?
That is a very good question, and it's very case by case. Generally, no. These are capital projects, and so the intent was that they're spent specifically on what's described in there. So typically, no. The indirect. This isn't from our reading. The intention of these state capital infrastructure was to get that project. I don't think there's much appetite for indirect cost on these.
So question from Lauren, if our project will last longer than 2 years, is there someone we need to contact specifically now or when the agreement is coming to an end?
No, so when we do get to the grant agreement, we'll kind of feel it out then, and we can extend the end of that contract for the skiff grants just to not have to do any amendments, just to change the year. So once we get everything, if you just let us know that 2 years is just definitely not going to cut it, we'll modify it before we execute it.
Right on. Someone asked about the slides. We are going to post these after the meeting.
And they are already posted. We did a very similar webinar with the local government groups on Tuesday, and the slide decks are nearly identical. And so if you go out to our website, all the information on this slide deck is out there right now.
So Laura asks, whoops, I'm sorry, my screen just jumped a minute. So Laura asked, so when we submit the statement of work, SOW, those dates should be completed, not completed during our reporting phase.
Yeah, for the scope of work, that we just kind of want to understand how long you think it's going to take, and what that budgeted time period is going to be. And so, don't let that affect the reporting piece is separate. That the dates on that are for, the money that you're listing out in that scope of work. And we understand that it's simply an estimate, and we do understand that.
Okay, question from Michael. On the conflict of interest policy, do you want us to just upload the policy or a copy of each on signed by each board and staff member?
Okay, so we don't actually need it signed. We just need a copy of the policy. It's definitely best practice for your organization to have your members sign it, but statutorily, we just need a copy of it. So please just upload us a copy. No reason to hold it up to get it signed by everyone. We just need a copy of it.
Okay, Jill asks, I'm having problems finding a person who does a yellow book audit. Do you have a list of auditors?
Um, we at this time I don't have like a list to give you, but when there is some time to get that audit done, and so we can help you, find someone to do that. And so we're just not quite there yet, but when we will be able to assist you with that.
Okay, question from Donna. Our grants are matching funds. How are multi-year signed pledges treated for the purpose of matching?
Okay. There's not a lot of matching grants in here, and so that's going to be kind of a case by case basis. And Donna, if we can circle back with you offline, I think there's only about 4 or 5 that are matching. Those are on our radar as they're a little unique. So I think we can get that sorted off. Not online here today, but we are aware of the matching ones, and those are just a little more complicated. And so, we'll get that spelled out in the contract. But that's on our radar. And so, Donna, we'll circle back with you offline if that's all right.
This is a note from Shauna. I've sent the first four required documents. Yay, Shauna, thank you. Um, whoops, I'm sorry, my screen just jumped. Let me come back down in here. I apologize. I think one added to the bottom and it rolled down on me. Okay, here we go. I've sent the first four required documents, but did not see any email this week.
Okay. So this week would have been the scope of work, and Donna, if we've got your organization, I'll have your analyst reach out. Carol, is it possible to tell which group she's with?
Shauna, can you just drop that into the bottom of Q&A for us, and we'll have it documented. Donna asked about a copy of the slides. We are going to get those posted.
Yeah, and they're out there right now.
Okay. Different Donna. Do vehicles count as capital projects?
Okay, so so do vehicles count as capital projects? I think it really does depend on what your grant description says. We do have a definition for capital improvements that's in statute. I don't believe we have, just a definition of, capital projects. And so I think we'd have to really look at the description of your grant, and then, look and see if buying a vehicle, really matches that. And so that's kind of a case by case. Unfortunately, we don't have, one list of acceptable uses for these. They really are unique by case based on the description and the budget. And so, we will make sure that that's flushed out in the scope of work. Again, based on the description and the budget, we'll work with our analysts will work with you to make sure that that checks out. Depending on, unfortunately, it really just depends on what that description and the budget is.
Okay, question from Jim. In receiving the money, do we need to have a separate bank account set up to utilize these funds?
Okay, and so the number one rule of these grants is do not commingle them. But we do understand that we can transfer them to your like main bank account that you normally do. And then, we're asking you to account for these funds separately. So you can, if you've got like sophisticated accounting software, you can account for them that way. If in the event that you don't, we always say just transfer those funds to their own bank account and account for them separately. So if you got a grant for $100,000, that's a SCIF grant. We'll transfer that to you, and then you can move that into its own account, so you can account for every single cent of that $100,000 separately. So that's where you get that. Should I put it in its own, bank account? If you don't have a way to, ensure that those funds are not commingled, you should, yes, definitely do that. We don't need to necessarily transfer the funds to that new bank account, though. If we've already got you in the system, let us just make that transfer to you, and then you can move that money on your end. That would be our guidance on that one.
Okay, so Megan has a similar question about auditors. Let's see if this is the same where you're going to follow up here. Um, do we have to use a certain pre-approved auditor from the Yellow Book audit, or is there a list of approved auditors?
So again, we're not quite there, but it pretty much like like majority of like CPA firms, and we'll kind of get some guidance out on this. But essentially that, we'll provide kind of the criteria that they would audit on, and then you would just kind of provide them our specs, and then they would conduct the audit. It's supplemental guidance for CPA firms, and we just need to get that out. Again, you do have some time to get these audits done, seeing you haven't spent the funds yet. And so we will get you some better guidance, on these audits and who can do them and all that good stuff. We've just been focused on getting this money out the door, but the supplemental guidance for those CPA firms is on our radar, and we will, have some documents for y'all and some technical, some guidance on those. We just aren't quite there in the process.
So Joseph asks, is there a link to sign up for notices from the Skiff Grant email account?
There is not, but if you want to email that Skiff Grant email account, we can make that happen. So just know that we can add anyone to our mailing list, but we can really only have one point of contact for each organization. Just from a contact perspective. So we're happy to add anyone to our Mailchimp distribution list. But we just don't want to, have any confusion on organizations. Once we establish our point of contact, we really prefer just to work with one individual from that agent, from that organization, and just to not muddy the waters. So, happy to add you. Just please shoot us an email.
Okay, here's a question from Carlton. Can Skiff grant funds be used for general operating expenses?
The short of that is no. No, that they really do need to be spent on the description in the budget. And again, we'll flush that out in the scope of work on what specifically you're going to spend that on. But by nature, these are capital projects, and so no operating costs, we really wouldn't be appropriate. Again, case by case, but I can just go ahead and say no, that probably wouldn't be appropriate.
Okay, here's a question from Tammy. My Skiff grants are under 500,000, but I am also receiving ARP funds. That puts the total over 500,000. Do I need the Yellow Book audit?
Ooh, I don't want to give you the wrong advice on this one, but it is the collection of all the grants. I would say the answer to that would be yes, you would need that yellow book audit. But let me circle back with you on that. I do believe the answer is yes. I don't think the source of funds will, really change that, but for that yellow book, it is, all the grants added up. So just based on that, I would say yes.
All right. Follow-up question from Laura. Non-Skiff grants, the general fund grant. What is the timeline for spending?
When it comes to spending, you can spend that as soon as we get it to you. I believe the to get it out, we're trying to work on that make that first payment by February 26th. But by spend, I do believe that would be up to the discretion of the nonprofit or the organization. And Bessie, please correct me if I'm wrong on that. I'm not sure if Bessie's on here.
Let's, you want to
Yeah, we'll table
get rid of
that
the
for
fund?
now, but I do believe I do believe that's correct. I've really been zoomed in on the skiff, but the spend I do believe is just I would just advise that you get all those funds spent prior to June 30th, 2023.
Yes, Jack, you're absolutely right. That's the right approach.
Okay, awesome. We'll keep rolling then.
Okay. Actually, Jack, do you want to take a second to talk about frequently asked questions and how we're compiling
Yeah,
those?
yeah. So again, I just want to, emphasize, please check out our website, Skiff Grants at OSBM. I can get back to here. It's under stewardship services, and we do have a lot of great FAQs. Happy to stay on here till 11 and get any questions answered. I already passed it. But here is where you're going to see everything. I know this says the grant database, but our FAQs are right next to that once you hit directed grants. And so I would really encourage everyone to just check that portion of our website out. If you've got the question, so does someone else. And so, I would definitely encourage everyone to check out the FAQs. But again, we're all also happy to help. But we do have some good guidance out there already. Um,
All right, well, let's keep rolling through what we can get through for the rest of these. This is from Dixon. This is a bit longer. I am with My Rover Reese Fellowship Homes. We have a SCIF grant. We have a capital project to replace an existing building with a new one. We are still in process of deciding if we will build or buy the new building. Is it okay at this point that we are still in the process of deciding the cost benefit of building versus buying the building?
Yeah, I don't think there's any issue with that, and I think it's good to think about these. But when you do fill out that scope of work, we're probably going to need to know a decision at some degree on what you're going to do there, just so we understand what the funds are going to be spent on. So when it's time to fill out that scope of work, we'll probably need to know which route you're going to go on that one.
All right, this is from Melissa. Did I hear correctly that the SCIF funds will be sent in one lump sum,
You
but
heard
direct?
you heard correct.
Yeah.
We don't do a lot of this, so enjoy it while you can. And so, absolutely, you will get one lump sum payment for the SCIF fund, for the SCIF grant.
But the follow-up to that is, but directed grants are being sent quarterly?
Bessie, do you wanna answer on the general fund there?
Yes, it depends on the grant amount, and we will be deciding with the scope of work, how this works. So we will reach out individually on each case.
But if it's under 100,000, I do believe you'll get it all in one payment if it's on the general fund.
Yes, that's right, Jack.
Question from Phil. Our organization is receiving a general fund grant and a SCIF grant. Would both grants be used for the same purpose? For example, equipment?
No, they're gonna individually have descriptions on those, and we'll have a contract agreement that spells out what you're gonna do with the SCIF grant funds, and then a separate one for the general fund. And so those will be viewed as two separate pots of money for our purposes, and so they'll each have the unique purpose on what they're gonna be spent on.
So Molly asks, if we have been awarded both a general fund and a SCIF, do we only need to turn in documentation once?
When we say documentation, yeah, I do believe we'll only need one W-9 from you and one of the conflict of interest and one no tax debt. And Bessie, that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe we can, use those documents as long as your organization allows us to.
Yes, you're absolutely right. But then you would be contacted by two people because um, the process is being managed by two different teams. So if you have heard from two different people, then please submit the same documents to both the individuals, whoever has contacted you.
All right. Question from Sarah. We want to confirm that our forms are uploaded correctly. Can we go in and see that the documents have been received? I can take this one, Sarah. The link that we're providing you is really just the upload. You would need to work with your OSBM assigned analyst if you have any question about what's been received on there. Alicia would like to know, can someone follow up with the town of Lillington? All of our grants are not showing up in the legend. Jack, I think
I got you on town of Lillington. And when we say legend, we're talking like that central grants database.
not clear from the question,
Okay.
but we can follow up on that.
Yeah, I'll flag that here.
Michael asks, do you need the conflict of interest form and our policy too?
We just need your policy. When you say form, are you referring to the one that's posted? They're probably referring to the one on our website. And we just wanted to provide a sample in the event that any organization didn't have one, and just to save them some time on that one. But if you've got one already that your organization uses, just send us your the one that you that's in use already.
All right. We're right at the 1 minute till end. So let's see if we can squeeze in one more here. This is from Michael. What if our estimates for our projects change?
That's fine. On the scope of work, I mean, if anything drastic, we'll probably need to note that. But we understand that the budget is just more of an estimation on that scope of work piece. But we would, probably flag anything that seemed to, make the project go in a different direction. But we do understand that, things change when it comes to, estimations of price and stuff like that. And so I wouldn't get too hung up on that. And again, we understand it's an estimation.
Okay, so maybe we can squeeze in just one more here. Will we receive the scope of work document from our budget analyst, or do we go to the website to find this?
I would go out to the website and just go ahead and get started on that. And then, they're happy to help, if you want them to review it and kind of, give you any guidance. But I would encourage you to go out to the website and grab that document. Also, look at there's some great examples that we already put together that, we've kind of, if you can almost just plug in the name of your organization on some of those examples and you could probably get away with that. And so, I would encourage you to go out to the website and download that form and go ahead and give it a whirl because we're going to need you to fill that out. And, we're happy to help edit or if you need assistance on, questions or anything like that. But no, please go out to the website, get that form and go ahead and get started on that.
All right, Jack, well, we're at the end of the meeting. We still have a lot of Q&A, so we'll definitely save those. And we've got your name, who's asking, and you registered, so we've got your email address now. So we can
Awesome.
follow
Well,
up on
hey,
those.
yeah, everyone, thank you so much. And please use our website as a resource. And then, if you got anything else, we'll try to get, some of these FAQs updated based on your questions today. And as well, again, you've got the Skiff email address. Want everyone, to be aware of that. That's our central email, and we'll get you hooked up with your analyst if you're not sure who that is or what's going on there. But again, everything's out on our website there. And, thank you so much for attending this today. And, look forward to working with you on these.
Hi, Jack.
Hey, Bessie. I'll give you a call here once you hop off.
Yes, we're just ending the meeting and we'll stop the recording.